afternoon's proceedings from now until about 4 o'clock will be transmitted over the live link after a 15-minute delay. Those with mobile telephones may use them to report what they hear in the hearing room, but only after 15 minutes have elapsed since the event that they're reporting. They may not be used for recording or photography. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Can we have on screen, please, MPS 0009432? This isn't in Mr. Beels' bundle, but is in HN127's bundle. This is an office note titled Operational Legends, and it was written by DS Tiddy, HN127. It's dated the 10th of October 2000, so it's around a year before you joined the SDS. But it addresses the same sort of topic as the support role player policy written by DS Gilbertson. Were you aware of this office note at the time you joined the SDS?
No.
Looking at page 2, paragraph 5, please. Thank you. Section that says the female antenna is a difficult creature to subdue, and whereas a rule they applaud monogamy, they do possess the ability to unearth doubts about perceived relationships. And then this: there have been recent operations, e.g. touchy subject and psycho dream, where due to the lifestyle employed by the operatives, their bona fides were considered unimpeachable. The author of this note, DS Tiddy, accepts that he was aware that touchy subject, who is DC Jenner, HN15, and Psycho Dream, DC Boiling, HN14, had been involved in sexual activity whilst undercover at the time that he wrote this note. Do you agree that this suggests that these officers were engaged in sexual activity undercover and that it assisted their credibility in the field?
Yes.
At the bottom, we can see it's circulated to HN58, HN53, Noel War, and Bernard Greeny. Did any of those officers, in particular perhaps HN53 and DS Greeny, who were there when you were in the SDS, ever mention to you that DC Jenner or DC Boiling had engaged in sexual activity undercover?
No.
Was it ever discussed, even in opaque terms?
Not to my recollection, and it's the sort of thing I think I would remember.
I want to look then now, that can be taken down, thank you, at HN 104, Carlos Saraki. You were his handler, is that right?
That's cover officer, yes.
Cover officer. How close were you with him? What was your relationship with him like?
It was, I'm just trying to think back. I mean, it was obviously a professional relationship first and foremost. I'm trying to remember if I knew him before, because obviously when you know somebody in a different work environment, you get to know them differently. I can't remember if we were. I knew him well professionally, mistakenly or whatever. I quite liked him. I thought he was a professional officer at that stage, providing good intelligence on a group that we were obviously interested in terms of potential public disorder. So I had no reason to think any other way, to be honest.
Did you think that you and he were able to communicate well regarding personal matters?
I thought so, yes.
Did you discuss his home life with him?
I think I remember having discussions about him, his wife, his son, I seem to remember. Went to visit his home at least one, possibly two occasions.
Were you aware at any stage that he was having marital difficulties?
No.
If you had been, would that have raised any concerns with you about any increased risk of sexual relationships undercover?
Yes.
What would you have done about it?
If he was having marital problems, issues, obviously his welfare would be my concern. In the normal course of events, I would be having a chat with him, see if I can give him, any help personally. Beyond that, as you know, there was the Ian Palmer, a psychiatrist, available for any counselling issues. I would have expected him to take up that opportunity, and spoken to DCI Dell.
Did you talk to him about who his close associates in the field were?
I would have done. I can't remember who they were.
Did you ask him if he was close to any particular women?
No.
Why not?
When you say that, I mean, as if I would ask him about women as opposed to men. No, I mean, I would have asked him about his associates. They would have been part of the day-to-day talking about his operation.
I want to ask you about a trip to Italy in December 2001. Your witness statement doesn't address this trip at all, but you do say at paragraph 245, page 101 of your witness statement, that you didn't have any knowledge of a sexual relationship with Lindsay at any time. Is that right? On this trip, HN 104 took a trip to Venice with Lindsay between the 17th and 19th of December in 2001, and you travelled with, or at least separately but you travelled on this trip to Italy as his cover officer, although you travelled to and stayed in Verona.
Yeah.
Do you recall this trip now?
I do, yes.
When questioned by counsel to the inquiry, Mr. Saraki couldn't remember whether he had lied to his managers, including his DS, which was you, about the reality of this trip, or whether he told you the truth and you in turn deceived DCI Dell in order to obtain authority for this travel. What was the purpose of the trip so far as you were concerned?
Firstly, I had no suspicion whatsoever that this was anything other than an operationally required trip. He would brief me, either from memory or from what I've read, that he needed to meet with some Italian activists. I had no reason to disbelieve that wasn't the case, so I would seek authority for him to travel through, the normal channel would be through Mike Dell. And if approved, I would then put the application in and cover him as normal on this trip. I had no reason to doubt it was anything other than that.
And so you got the information about the reason and the necessity for this trip from HN 104?
Yes.
And solely from him?
As far as I can remember, whether there was corroborative information that I could have seen about a meeting of activists or a meeting of a particular group, which, I would do if that information was available. So there was a publication or he'd given me some sort of verification, then I would obviously have that in my possession. But I can't remember if there was any other corroboration.
If we look, please, at the travel authorisation, MPS 0527780, it's at tab B49 of the bundles. So on page 1 we see that Socialist Party activists will travel to Italy to extend links with their Italian counterparts, and HN 104 is to accompany the activists. This is DCI Dell's file note, and it records at the bottom that you will travel separately as cover from the 17th to the 19th of December 2001. And if we go to page 5, please. There we can see expenses claims signed for by you and indeed DCI Dell. And if we look at page 7, that's the hotel bill, and then I think over the page, concede that your flights were to Verona. Do you see that?
Yes.
And in terms of the reason you were accompanying HM104, was the general idea that a cover officer would be on hand close by in the same country in case the UCO needed anything?
Absolutely, yes.
Is that right? And indeed in case anything went wrong?
Indeed.
Did HN104 keep in contact with you during this trip?
In the normal course of events, he would on at least a daily basis. I've no recollection that he, anything else happened.
And would that be by phone?
Yes.
Never in person?
No.
Would you ever have seen him in person, even if you didn't make contact with him?
I may have done if there was an event he was attending. I know on a previous foreign trip, I can't remember, it might have been somewhere like Belgium or Holland, he was attending an event, a march demonstration, that I saw him then. So if there was an event that I could go as a member of the public and observe, I may have seen the presence. If it was a private meeting of activists, the scenario that portrays it, I wouldn't go anywhere near it, no.
And we know on this trip, according to Lindsay's evidence, that this was a romantic getaway, so far as she was concerned,
Yes.
and there was no contact at all with any activists. Does that suggest that you didn't see him in person on this particular trip?
No, I didn't see him in person at all, no, not on this trip.
And is that a positive recollection, or just your assumption, given what you know now,
That I didn't see him.
that you didn't see him?
No, he was meant to be in Venice. I was some distance away, which, for operational reasons. I had no idea what his exact location was going to be, so there's no way I could monitor that. And there were no public events that I was aware of that I could have attended to observe his presence, so no, I wouldn't have seen him at all.
So you didn't do any close passes on this particular occasion?
No.
You know what I mean by a close pass?
Yes.
Was it an attempt to see the UCO in person but not make direct contact, such as walking past them in a public place and not acknowledging them? You didn't do any of those? And that was because you didn't know necessarily where he was going to be and there was no particular event to attend?
Not necessarily for that reason. A close pass, as you put it, it was not common tactic that we used. If I knew where he was going to be, I might discreetly keep, an observation just to see he was there, just to see he looked safe. But apart from that, we wouldn't have organised, a pass-by or anything, a close pass.
So direct contact with him on this particular trip was limited to a phone call
To phone
each
calls,
day?
yes.
And do you recall if he phoned every day?
As I said earlier, I don't remember him not calling, so it's more than likely. The protocol was he would call every day. If he hadn't, which I think I dealt with somewhere else where he didn't call, which I think was the Florence trip, it was something I was conscious of and something I would deal with. So my assumption is that he made contact each day, yes.
And do you recall the nature of those conversations? What was he telling you?
It would depend whether he was on his own. If he was on his own, he would just talk to me normally if he felt safe. Or there would have been a pretext that we would have established beforehand that would explain the conversation. I might be a work colleague or something of that nature, but I can't remember specifics.
Lindsay gave some evidence that on this trip, which, as I said, she understood to be a purely romantic getaway for the two of them. They were together the vast majority of the time, and it was essentially a holiday. They spent their time doing touristy type things. She gives some evidence that they split for only a matter of about 20 minutes or so in the Rialto food market, and so they were apart for some 20 minutes. And when she returned, she walked up to him from behind and noticed that he was on the phone and heard him saying something along the lines of, "Yeah, she's not here, she's pissed off with me, mate." And she believes now, following making inquiries of his activist group, that he was speaking to you as his handler at that time. Do you recall any such conversation with HM 104 in which he used words to the effect of, "Yeah, she's not here, she's pissed off with me, mate," in relation to Lindsay?
I've no memory of that type of conversation, but as I say, there may have been a pretext we'd agreed beforehand. But in terms of the wordings there, I don't understand at all, and I'm not quite sure where Lindsay would have got my name from either, or the fact that I was a cover officer. I'm a bit unclear
She
on
clearly
that.
found out afterwards.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Right.
What she now believes is that he was talking to his handler, which would
Well,
have
of course,
been
it could have been anybody.
What did you tell the SDS office or your DI and DCI about this trip afterwards? Do you recall?
I can't recall. It would normally be a debrief. I would normally sit down with 104, do a debrief. Who did he meet? What happened? What decisions were made? Just a normal intelligence gathering debrief.
Do you
which I would
recall
then-
what he told you?
No, not now. No.
Did he provide you any particular intelligence arising out of this trip?
I can't recall.
If he did, what would have happened to it?
It would have been reported in an update.
Given we know now, certainly on Lindsay's evidence, that, and accepted, I think, by HM 104, this was a romantic getaway of a couple, and he was not doing any reporting or observing of activists or attending any type of activist event. What's your view now on how he was able to pull the wool so firmly over your eyes if it's right that you didn't know anything about it?
Yeah. Well, my initial reaction, apart from once I've got over the anger and upset of what happened, was acute embarrassment, professionally and personally. The fact that, obviously I'd been deceived, but that's not the most important thing, of course. It shocked me, to be honest.
Was the supervision of UCOs abroad something of a blind spot amongst SDS management?
Well, obviously on this particular case, I would say yes, but I'd done other overseas visits that had gone very successfully, but occasionally with incident that I had to deal with, but not with any other issues like this, as far as I'm aware.
The supervision is effectively involved complete trust in the UCO, didn't it?
Say complete trust, but it was, I think, as I said this morning, the trust was a big element of it, but it wasn't the only element. There would have been corroboration as best as possible, and obviously on this occasion I'm not aware of what corroboration there was for his reason for the trip, but normally there would be some other attendant reporting that we might have corroborated on. On this particular occasion, up until this stage, I had no reason to suspect that 104 was lying, and worse. And the fact that he did, I feel deeply embarrassed, deeply disappointed, and but I'm also conscious that it's not, I'm not the real victim here.
If your management or supervision of him had been more intrusive, he could have been discovered in this relationship on this trip, couldn't he?
If I'd put surveillance on him, yes.
Because one couldn't fail to notice that this was a romantic trip if he'd actually been seen in the company of Lindsay.
If he was under surveillance, yes.
Were you aware of HM 104's living arrangements at the time that you were his handler, and particularly in the period of 2002 to 2004?
Forgive me, before we come to that,
Yes,
can
of course.
I just deal with a topic arising out of the
Yes, sir.
trip to Venice. You see the date of the application for the trip, which is the 30th of November. That was the document you were shown first.
Yes.
Your evidence at the beginning this morning was that you thought you might have joined the SDS as late as January 2002. That plainly can't be right, can it?
No, I mean, and I wasn't sure. I just know it was post 9/11, and I felt it was something like 2 or 3 months after that, but I could be wrong.
On any view, your trip out to Verona in support of HN 104 in Venice would have been your first foreign trip for the SDS.
Yes, true.
And probably the first event of any incident, the first event which was in any way noteworthy.
Probably so, yes.
Had you known Carlo Sracci, HN 104, professionally or personally, before you joined the SDS?
I've tried to think about that, whether, obviously, I don't think so. I think the first time I met him was, I think I said in my statement, when I met a group of the UCOs at 53's house, I think.
Yes.
I don't recall. If I did, it might have been, socially or something. Our paths might have crossed, but I didn't know him that well, as far as I can recall.
Yeah. So if you had known him, it would have been as a professional colleague, but not a close one.
Exactly, sir. Yes.
Very well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I was asking whether you were aware of HN 104's living arrangements at the time you were his handler, in particular in between 2002 and 2004.
I would have done. Yes, I would have. Yeah, obviously.
And did you know if he was living alone or with someone else?
To my recollection, he was alone.
Did you discuss his cover accommodation with him?
I would have done, yes.
Did you ask if he was living with anyone?
I can't recall.
And was it your responsibility to monitor his cover accommodation as his handler?
Partly. In terms of the mechanics, the logistics, we had, I think, and I can't remember if it was at this stage, but we did have Matt Simons as a logistics officer who dealt with all the, as I say, the mechanics and logistics of properties, cars, that type of thing. If he was in post then, he would have dealt with that. Otherwise, HM 53 was normally responsible for the admin side of property and that type of thing.
In your witness statement, you say at paragraph 110, page 44, that as cover officers we would visit the UCO's cover addresses. Is that right?
No, sorry, did I say that?
You did, yeah. Paragraph
We would
110.
visit their address. Well,
their cover address, yeah. We would visit the UCO's cover addresses.
okay, that's a mistake. Operational security would dictate we wouldn't. Normally, we might, if we had reason to, we might observe. Again, it was in the normal course of events, the logistics officer would be the one who would know. But the reason for that was he had a covert identity, so he was able to, if he had to visit the accommodation to help or to check on anything, he had a covert identity if there was any security issues.
So you didn't visit HM
Not
104's
physically, no.
cover accommodation?
No, if that was said in the statement, then that's a mistake, sorry.
Yeah, it's on screen. Paragraph 110 says, as cover officers, we would visit the UCO's cover addresses or the surrounding area to understand the environment they were going to be living in and to do a risk assessment.
I think that was too precise. When I say visit the address, we'd visit the surrounding area just to get a feel for the area. We would have done checks on who the neighbours were, that type of thing, in case there was any security issues. So I've written that in a very unclear way. We visit the address environment, not the actual address, because
Thank you.
there would be security issues around that.
Were you aware that prior to September 2002, HM 104 had been sharing accommodation with HN 77?
I can't recall. So this was when, sorry? 2002?
Prior to September 2002.
I can't recall that now.
Is that something that all managers and supervisors in the SDS office would know?
I think so, yeah. Well, yes, they would do, sorry.
If you had known, would you have had any concerns about that type of arrangement?
77 was, I think I know.
She was codenamed
Oh, yeah.
Fever Pitch.
Yes, I would, yes.
Do you recall any discussions about HN 104's accommodation arrangements with HN 77 changing in September 2002? Or thereabouts?
I'm struggling to remember, to be honest. No.
There's a file note, MPS 0010203. It's not in Mr. Beels' bundle, sir, but it is in HN 104's bundle at tab B61. It's a file note dated the 13th of September 2002, and it refers to Craggy Island, which is Mr. Saraki. Discussion of his August note, 3 issues discussed yesterday at West CI, which is Craggy Island HM 104, SB, which is you, I think, Steve
Yes.
Beels,
Yes.
MD, which is DCI Dell, moving in with Weary Alfred, linked to above, moving out of FP, which is Fever Pitch, HN 77's flat. So, and we see from the bottom that you were copied in along with other managers from the office. Does that jog your memory at all?
No, I saw this in recent evidence, and it was new to my memory.
So you don't recall what the
No.
discussions were at that time?
I can't, I'm afraid.
Did anyone ever suggest to you that HN 77 may have been involved in a relationship with an activist?
No.
What inquiries did you make that you can recall about the reason that HM 104 was moving and who he was moving in with?
I'm just reading this again and try and refresh my memory. And as strange as it may seem, I can't recall this at all.
So you don't know if you inquired why he was moving and who he was moving in with?
No.
And I take it from your previous answers you didn't visit his new cover address, but you may have visited the surrounding area.
Yes.
That can be taken down, thank you. Are you now aware that HN 104 started a relationship with Donna McLean at the end of September 2002, and Donna McLean says that they were living together before Christmas 2002 and that they lived together until May 2004?
Only from what's been said at the inquiry, yes.
You didn't know at the
No,
time?
I didn't have no knowledge at all.
And so the reason HN 104 was no longer going to be sharing his accommodation with HN 77 was because he was moving in with Donna McLean. Do you recall any discussion amongst managers about HM 104's living arrangements at this time?
I can't remember now.
Can we just look at one more document? It's MPS 0527068. Again, this isn't in Mr. Beels' bundle, but it is in HN 52's bundle. This is a rent book that relates to the property that HN 104 shared with Donna McLean in 2003. And on the front, we can see the details, Donna McLean as rent collector and landlord, next to the word landlord, Ms. D. McLean, and then above we see tenant Carlo Neri, which is HN 104's cover name. The address is in Elgin Avenue. Does that ring a bell as the location of HM 104's cover accommodation?
Elgin Avenue. It does sound familiar, but I'm struggling to remember whether it's because I know Elgin Avenue or it's from this. I haven't seen this document, so it's not from that, no.
I think it would help if you were to have a hard copy of the document. I understood one had been prepared, but if it hasn't been, he can have mine.
There might be one somewhere on his desk, but thank you, sir.
There's no need to go beyond that page. No,
Yes,
up to the page that you've reached.
Yes.
You're going to be asked about those, but not about what comes after, I think.
If we could look at page 6, please, as well. So here we can see, and we can zoom in on the screen, thank you.
Yes.
We can see monthly entries from January 2003 to September 2003. And in the middle column, we can see the figure of £685. And next to it, we have initials DMCL, Donna McLean, what look like the initials of Donna McLean. And then there are redacted initials of the landlord. Have you seen this document before? Did you see it at the time?
No.
Are you sure about that?
I don't recall this document specifically. I don't recall seeing any documents of this nature at all.
Being careful of anonymity, do you know who would have been responsible for a document like this?
Normally, a document of this kind would be part of the logistics officer I spoke about earlier, Matt Simons, part of his role in terms of the logistics, the documentation. So provided he was in office at the time, and again I can't remember the date, that would normally be his responsibility.
So it would have come from the SDS back office, just not
Back
necessarily
office,
from you?
Yes, and if Matt Simons hadn't, it would normally be HM53 who was responsible for all the auditing of the unit. So there's no real reason I would have been shown or seen the document.
What's your understanding of what Donna McLean's connection to the property is from this?
What, before seeing this, or?
If you'd seen this document,
I haven't seen.
but if you'd seen it, what would your understanding have been about Donna McLean's connection to the property?
I don't think I knew at the time who Donna McLean was, so it would just be in the landlord's name. Is that correct?
Well,
She's
the
landlord.
If we go back to
Oh, I see. She's sharing.
page 2.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
She's described as rent collector.
Rent collector.
And the landlord is someone different underneath the
I
privacy
see.
redaction, which it says landlord.
So the rent collector would be whoever they're collecting the rent from.
Forgive me, as I understand the document, the rent collector is either the landlord, whose initials and have been redacted to protect his privacy, or Donna McLean. So there are two rent collectors named.
Okay.
Would this have prompted you to question whether Carlo Saracchi was living with someone in the sense of being a couple?
It would certainly be something, looking at it now, that would be worthy of checking, yes.
And so would you, if you'd seen this document, would it have prompted you to check who Ms. McLean was?
I would have asked 104, yes.
And would you have carried out any other independent checks into who she was? Or would you have taken it on trust, whatever HM 104 said?
If I'd seen that and it had raised a red flag, for instance, yes, I would have done, which wouldn't have been difficult, just to check out who she was.
We saw that the figure of £685 was recorded in the rent book. What do you understand that to represent? Would it have been rent alone or a composite of rent and expenses?
I have no idea.
It's page 6.
So this is the monthly rent, deposit followed by monthly payments.
Yeah.
Again, it's not a document I'm aware of. It's not. Again, it may be this was dealt with by the logistics officer or by HM53. I'm sure HM53, I know, maintained meticulous records, so it would be my guess that he would know what this is.
So in terms of the payment of expenses for HN 104's cover accommodation, you wouldn't have been involved in that as his cover officer. It would have been either the DI or the logistics officer, yes. Matthew Simons in the back office. Is that right?
In the normal course of events, yes. And if there were any suspicions, then obviously that would have been raised with me. But as far as I can recall, and I think I would recall, no suspicions were reported to me.
I'd like to look at another trip abroad, please, in relation to HN 104. A trip again to Italy, to Bologna with Donna McLean. You were the cover officer for HN 104 on this particular trip. Do you recall it now?
This was mentioned before, and I've struggled to remember going to Bologna. So I would ask if there's a travel authority or anything that would find
the travel authorisation is at MPS 0011603 at tab B61 of the bundle, sir. It's dated the 31st of January 2003. And it, in fact, provides authority to travel to Florence. But given the date, and it provides authority to travel between the 7th and the 10th of February, which we can see at the bottom there, DS Beels will travel separately in support. Donna McLean has given evidence about a trip to Bologna for what she thought was HN 104's 32nd birthday and Valentine's Day in February 2003.
Sorry.
Do you think, therefore, that this travel authority was for that trip?
As I say, I struggled to remember a trip to Bologna itself. I have been to Bologna, and as far as I was aware, it was the first time I've been since this date. I did go to Florence. I remember that covering Craggy Island. But
was that in February 2003?
I'm assuming so, but by the records, I've got no personal record.
Did any other DS accompany you on that trip?
To Florence, I remember travelling with Bernie Greenie.
Did HN 104 keep in contact with you during that trip?
I remember this because there was a loss of contact. I think he missed either one or two of his daily calls, so we were obviously concerned. I think we reported it back to the office that 104's not responded, but by the time we'd escalated it any further, he'd reconnected with us, if you like, and apologised for not being able to, but because he was in a difficult position with his activists, something of that nature. So there was, obviously from our own operational security reasons, we were concerned. And it was unusual not to be contacted by a UCO who was abroad, so that's why I sort of remember it now. But as I say, before we escalated it any further, he remade contact, apologised, and explained that, gave us what probably was a story about what he'd been doing and how he couldn't communicate with us.
Did you see him at all in person, by sight, on this trip that you recall?
In Florence? No, I can't recall, so it's unlikely.
So direct contact was again very limited
By phone,
with him.
Yeah.
What was he telling you when he called? Do you recall? Other than that he'd been unable to. I tried to
rack my brain to try and remember, but I can't recall. All I have to say is we were sort of satisfied with the explanation at the time. I was with Bernie, and we were both aware of it. We were working together, so we'd obviously discussed it. What should we do here? And by the time we contacted the office as part of the protocol, and then he remade contact, so it was left at that.
We know from Donna McLean's evidence that, again, this trip was essentially a romantic one as far as she was concerned. They stayed in a 5-star hotel, they ordered room service, he had arranged everything, and they went sightseeing and to a football match, and it was to celebrate what he said was his 32nd birthday, and for Valentine's Day. Had there been more direct contact between you and, indeed, DS Greenie and HN 104 during this trip in terms of more intrusive supervision, it's likely that relationship would have been discovered on this trip, isn't it?
If we'd put surveillance on him, yes.
Did he provide you with any intelligence arising out of this trip?
That I can't remember. I mean, there would normally be a debrief report.
We're not aware of one. Would a lack of intelligence have caused you to question the nature of this trip, do you think?
Yes. I would fully expect a debrief when he got back to the UK.
In which you say he must have lied to you.
He's obviously lied consistently, yes.
But is this again another example of supervision abroad being something of a blind spot amongst SDS management? It's very hands-off, trusting the UCO, isn't it?
I think it does demonstrate, yes, there are serious challenges when an officer is operating abroad. I will say that I've done a number of covers of trips abroad, and in some very difficult circumstances, without a problem, operating on this system. But obviously, the system didn't work on this occasion. So, I would, if I went back with hindsight, I would have to look at what we could put in place to provide that sort of corroboration.
I'd like to move on then to another topic involving Mr. Saraki. His evidence to the inquiry on the 3rd of March was that he disclosed to DCI Dell both of his relationships undercover, and he had told DCI Dell that he'd been in a relationship with Donna McLean and lived with her, but the relationship was over, which was a lie, he says. And he recalls this being at the end of 2003. DCI Dell, in his witness statement to the inquiry, we don't need to bring it up, but for reference, it's MPS 0749596, paragraph 232A on page 163, says this: I accept that CS did tell me on one occasion that he had entered into a sexual relationship whilst undercover. I cannot recall exactly when he told me this, whether it was at the end of 2003 or some other time. He told me that the relationship was with a woman who was not an activist. He did not tell me that he had been in any other sexual relationships during his deployment. Did DCI Dell tell you that HN 104 had disclosed to him that HN 104 had been in a relationship or relationships whilst he was undercover?
No.
Why do you think that was? As HN 104... Okay, well, let me ask and see if he can help.
That would be on the assumption that he was there when this happened, which isn't right.
Okay, well, let me ask the question. Do you recall any conversation with DCI Dell about Carlos Araki disclosing to him a relationship?
No.
None at all.
None at all.
I think, so to jog the memory, if it's capable of being jogged, DCI Dell's evidence was that this took place either at the end of 2001 or very early 2002, not 2003.
Thank you, sir. So still within this witness's period of time on the SDS.
But it would be near to the beginning of it rather than a little further in.
Does that help at all, Mr. Beels?
Not in terms of recall, because I know Mike never discussed this with me, so...
Would you have expected him to have told you as HM 104's cover officer?
I thought about this obviously a lot because, you know, I have a good relationship with Mike. I can only assess that for reasons of perhaps confidentiality between the two, he felt he couldn't breach that confidentiality and tell me. It's obviously something I would, as a cover officer, obviously want to know. It would be important in any sort of future observation or awareness. I listened to Mike's evidence and I don't think that question was asked, so, you know, I'd be interested in what the answer was. I suspect, knowing Mike's moral standing, that he would have felt, you know, he's constrained by confidentiality. That's all I can think.
What would you have done if he had told you?
That he was having an affair?
That he'd been told by HM 104 that he'd had sexual relationship undercover?
Well, I would have been horrified on a number of levels. I mean, it was... I've heard the evidence, so I've seen how Mike dealt with it. I'm not sure if I would have dealt with it in the same way.
What would you have expected him to do?
Well, I came back to the point I made earlier, and I don't think it's a trivial one, is that the officer was subject to developed vetting. This was, and affairs put you in a position of vulnerability to blackmail, and that would almost automatically withdraw your vetting. If his vetting was withdrawn, he'd be no longer employed in special branch.
Would you have expected him to have removed HM 104 from his deployment?
It's difficult. You're asking me for my view, and I've got a huge amount of respect for Mr. Dell, but I may have done things differently, yes.
And indeed removed him from the SDS?
I think so, yes.
He wasn't removed. DCI Dell said in his witness statement that he instructed HM 104 to end the relationship immediately, and that as long as he did so, he'd be allowed to remain on the unit. And he also says that he didn't remove him from the unit because it was likely that the relationship had not endangered his operational security and was more in the nature of an ill-advised extramarital affair unconnected with his deployment. And he says that HM 104 didn't tell him he was having or had been in a relationship with an activist, and that if he had told him that, he would have removed him from the unit. If it suggested that the way that DCI Dell dealt with this shows that he did in fact countenance improper behaviour, making a distinction between it being with an activist and a non-activist, would you accept that?
I would accept if it was with a non-activist. That would still be red flag to me. One action I would have taken, obviously this is in danger of getting into a private matter between 104 and his wife, so it would be difficult to to be seen as intruding into that. And, you know, other officers may have marital problems, but if it's not encroached onto his operation, you know, it's still, I still would come back to the vetting issue. We knew in the branch if we had affairs, you know, and it was made known, we would be out.
It's contrary also to DCI's express direction on prohibiting sexual relationships whilst undercover, isn't it?
Clearly, yes.
In those circumstances, would you agree that your assessment of DCI Dell having a strong moral compass was mistaken?
No, I think he has a strong moral compass. These moral issues are never straightforward, are they? I'm sure he dealt with it within that moral compass, but he probably dealt with it in a way some of us would have done differently.
HN 104 says that he started a relationship with his current partner in 2005. Were you aware of that relationship at the time?
No.
Did you hear anything about it from DCI Dell?
No.
HM 104 said in evidence that he told DCI Flood in 2006 and then later told HN 72. And he says DCI Flood gave him permission to tell his partner who he really was. Did DCI Flood or HN 72 ever tell you that HN 104 had admitted to a relationship or that they had given him permission to disclose his real identity?
No.
Would you have expected them to, as you were his
cover officer? Yes. I seem to be kept in the dark a lot, which may be, you know, a fault of my own, but for whatever reason, I didn't know.
So you didn't know anything about that at the time?
No.
I want to move on, please, to DC Boiling, HN 14. We know that on the 12th of December 2000, so before your time on the SDS, but not too far before, Rosa, a woman who DC Boiling had had a sexual relationship with undercover, called the SDS office on its office or duty number 4 times. Now, as I said, it's before your time, but HN 129 DS Wars evidence indicates that the calls to the office by Rosa alerted him to the fact of that relationship between DC Boiling and Rosa, and that he subsequently shared this information with SDS managers whose exact identities he can no longer recall. On your arrival in the SDS after this time, sometime around October 2001, did you become aware of this relationship from any of the managers in the SDS? Like, for example, DS Greeny or HN53?
No, I've no recollection at all.
It would have been relevant information for any DS or supervisor or manager to know about, wouldn't it? That both that DC Boiling had had a relationship, sexual relationship undercover, and that his former partner was trying to discover him and had rung the SDS office.
Yes.
And it would have been relevant information to know from a welfare perspective for your management of your UCOs to know that the acknowledged risk of a sexual relationship had indeed eventuated in the recent past.
I agree, yes.
In order that you could supervise your UCOs in that knowledge.
Indeed, yes.
Would that knowledge have affected the way you supervised your UCOs?
It would have raised my awareness, obviously, especially at an early stage when I'm, you know, new myself and just sort of finding my way. It would have been very useful, yes.
And it would have been important information to know from an operational security perspective,
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Because this was quite a serious breach or risk to operational security, widely known about at the time in the SDS.
It was, but I can't recall it, I'm afraid. I mean, again, it may be I was new, I was finding my feet, there was a lot going on. I mean, it might be something that was spoken about, but I wasn't clear what it was. I can't recall, but...
The SDS office moved premises in July 2002, so sometime some months
Yes.
after you joined the SDS. The inquiry understands that that was prompted because Rosa had discovered it, essentially. Were you aware of that at the time?
My memory was that we were due to move office, whether it was operational security reasons, but I can't remember what. I mean, certainly Rosa doesn't ring a bell as to why. I thought this was perhaps just every so many years we move offices for operational security reasons. And I assumed that was the case. Whether I was being kept in the dark for a reason, perhaps because I was new, I don't know.
HN16, James Thompson, he was on the unit deployed when you joined. He was withdrawn from the field in March 2002. Do you recall him?
I've thought back. I remember seeing him in the office once, possibly twice, but I did,
You weren't his cover officer.
No,
so.
and it was all unfamiliar to me.
At the time, did you know or have any suspicion about him engaging in deceitful sexual relationships with women we're calling Sarah or Ellie in his cover identity?
Not specifics. I just knew there were serious questions about his deployment, and I knew that I think Mike and HM53 were dealing with what I understood to be some very sensitive issues around his deployment, but that he was effectively off the unit by that stage. So, I knew very little. He was, I think I saw him in the office once or twice, and I presume he was just, clearing up. That's all I can remember.
If we look, please, at MPS 0719770, this is DCI Dell's file note of the 22nd of March 2002, and it records an assessment of risk attached to the conclusion of HN16's operation, including modification of his exit strategy, following the discovery of irregularities in the conduct of his operation. Do you think you would have seen or were aware of this file note at the time in March 2002?
I don't recall it. I don't recall the circumstances either.
Did you know that DCI Dell and HN53 had suspicions that Thompson had indeed engaged in sexual relationships undercover?
Not that was told to me at the time, no.
Those suspicions weren't further investigated. What's your view about that now? Should they have been?
My view, obviously I'm not familiar with the exact circumstances, but my initial reaction would be yes, but I obviously was not involved with that.
Does it call into question the view that sexual relationships were not tolerated by the time you were in the SDS? And in fact they were.
Tolerated, don't think they were tolerated. I think they'd happened. But as I'll come back to, Mike's instructions were quite clear.
Doesn't a failure to investigate those types of suspicions and institute disciplinary action constitute a toleration of the relationships?
It could be seen that way, yes.
Disciplinary action wasn't taken against Mr. Thompson. Was the operational security of the unit seen as paramount over pursuing any type of disciplinary action against an officer for this type of sexual misconduct?
I wouldn't say it was paramount. It was a major consideration.
It took priority over disciplining an officer for undertaking sexual relationships undercover.
I don't know. I mean, that's more, I would say, a managerial position.
Can we look at, please, MPS 0719722? This is in HN53's bundle. It's a file note of the 5th of July 2002, and it's HN53's file note. This records an overview and summary of inquiries into James Thompson's activities during the course of his SDS operation, as you see from paragraph 1 at the top there. It flagged up grave concerns about a number of different aspects of his deployment, including the quality and quantity of his reporting, unauthorised travel, removing pages from his passport, creating a second false identity in the name of a deceased child, obtaining unauthorised passports and driving licences, and possible undeclared income. But importantly, it also detailed the high volume of calls to Sarah, Ellie and Wendy, and recorded HN16's privately expressed concerns to HM1 that the officer's inquiries related to the fact that he had established relationships whilst in the field. And there were also doubts about all aspects of Operation Lime. Do you think you were copied into this report?
No.
Were you aware of any of its contents, perhaps from discussions with HN53 or DS Greenie or anyone else in the SDS office?
No, as far as I can remember, this was... obviously, they were dealing with sensitive issues, and I think 53, Bernie Greenie and Mike Dell would have kept that within themselves, rather than at that stage anyway bring me into it for some reason.
But weren't these suspicions, particularly in relation to aspects such as the suspicion of relationships whilst in the field, relevant to all supervisors and managers in the SDS office?
Absolutely.
So they should have brought you in, shouldn't they?
At some point there should have been some sort of conversation. All I knew was that there was a lot of inquiry, a lot of investigation going on to Thompson's operation, and there were serious concerns.
But you didn't know
the specifics weren't discussed with me.
That can be taken down now, thank you. HN5, John Dines and Helen Steele, please. I'd like to ask you about that. What did you know during your time of the SDS of Helen Steele's search for John Dines and the steps being taken as part of Operation Muscat? Would you have known the details of that?
Just only in general details, perhaps conversation that we knew it happened. And I seem to think at some stage 53 may have gone out to New Zealand.
So we know that Helen Steele visited John Dines' genuine parents in London in 1995, and we know that her first visit to New Zealand was 1998, and her second visit was December 2002 to February 2003. So some of that obviously predates your time in the SDS, and the latter visit to New Zealand was during your time of the SDS. What did you know about the specifics of her search for John Dines?
I didn't know any specifics. I knew John. I knew it was being dealt with in-house. I knew, but I wasn't, probably because I was not part of the investigation team, if you like. I was outside that. So I knew very little. I knew it was going on in sort of general terms.
Did you know that John Dines had a relationship with Helen Steele whilst undercover?
I think I knew that was the reason for a lot of what was going on.
That was the reason she was making such efforts to find him?
I don't know that. I think that may have been the conversations that were being had.
So that was known in the SDS at the time?
I'm trying to recall conversations that were had, but I mean, my knowledge is obviously influenced by what I know now and since, but I think we would have suspected, if not known, that if Helen was going to that extreme
length,
I think the likely interpretation there was some relationship.
So it was effectively common knowledge by that time in the office?
Within the office, I suppose, yes.
In relation to HN15, Mark Jenner, did you know about Alison's attempts to trace Terry, who was Mark Jenner's cover employer, which was happening around the end of May 2001, so before your time? But did you come to learn of those attempts to trace him by Alison when you joined the SDS. Would that have raised a similar suspicion as to why Alison was so keen to chase Mark Jenner?
Absolutely, yes.
HN91 had a sexual relationship whilst undercover, disclosed his identity to her, and remains with the woman in question to date, so far as we understand. Did you know about that at this time?
Can I just look? I'm not sure who we're...
Yes, of course, but do look who 91 is.
No.
HN60 has recently admitted to a sexual relationship whilst undercover. Did you know of that sexual relationship at the time?
No.
And HN18, Rob Hastings had a sexual relationship whilst undercover with a woman we're referring to as Maya. Were you aware of that relationship?
Only through this inquiry.
Looking back over your time as a DS and a supervisor in the SDS, how do you explain not knowing and being oblivious to all these different UCO's sexual misconduct?
It does look like very poor supervision. I can see that. It's plain to see. I've told the inquiry what I know, and you know, honestly, what my knowledge is. When I look at it now, it is quite horrendous.
And placing that
It's
level
insufficient on
of
its own,
trust
yeah,
is insufficient.
Yeah.
And that should have been recognised at the time, shouldn't it, given the various different knowledge that had built up in relation to these different officers?
Yes, I think that can't be denied.
A more intrusive approach to management could have uncovered many, if not all, of these relationships at the time, couldn't it?
Yeah, with what we know now, yes.
And this wasn't a case of just a single bad apple, was it? It was consistent with relationships of this nature almost being standard practice, given the number of them that occurred over time.
There is a pattern, yes, definitely.
And it's certainly not a handful of officers, as you say in your witness statement. It's rather more than that, isn't it?
Yes.
I'd like to move on, please, to Ripper. At paragraph 246B, page 102 of your witness statement, you suggest that the assessment of collateral intrusion in HN 104's CHIS authorisation review contained generic terminology. And I just want to ask you about that. When you say generic terminology, what do you mean by that? Do you mean they're not words chosen by you for this specific authorisation?
No, it would be words. I mean, I wrote the authorisation, so I take responsibility for how it's worded.
Yes, if we just take a look at it, MPS 0526932 at pages 89 to 92. So that's the front page of the authorisation, just so that you can see it. And if we can look, please, at page 91, possibly a bit bigger, and the top there. So it says, under collateral intrusion, UCO Craggy Island has taken necessary measures to avoid unnecessary intrusion into the lives of those not directly connected with the operation. And you say that is the generic terminology. We had to deal with this in a standard format in the form, and this acknowledged that he took measures to avoid unnecessary intrusion. The authorisation doesn't state what measures he had taken to avoid unnecessary intrusion, does it?
No, it doesn't, no.
What steps did you take to satisfy yourself that he had taken such measures, what they were, and that they would indeed avoid unnecessary intrusion?
I can only come back to what I've said earlier, is that the officers were trained to get a complete picture of it, so they would collect, a lot of information. When it came to reporting that, that's where I'd see the actual intrusion would become a significant factor in terms of what's being reported. I can see that this is referring to the actual act of intrusion into other groups or individuals.
Well, do you recall what he told you about what necessary measures he had taken to avoid unnecessary intrusion?
I can only interpret that as meaning he understood what collateral intrusion was, and that he himself would take action to prevent in terms of actual reporting. Now, it's difficult to say what he's done in terms of intrusion in action, so to speak.
Particularly given we know he had several sexual relationships.
Well, yeah, obviously, yes, yeah.
This kind of terminology, particularly copied over a number of different authorisations in exactly the same terms, renders the content meaningless in this regard, doesn't it?
I certainly think it undermines it, yes.
Does the generic terminology apply to any other aspect of the authorisation, so far as you remember? Or was it this collateral intrusion the only example?
That I don't know. You'd have to look at other examples. We were dealing obviously with a lot of authorisations over a period of time, so this wording may have been used a few more times. I can't recall without actually looking.
And do you know if this same terminology was used more widely by other DSs and managers in the SDS?
I can't say, no. I don't know.
We know that it was used in another of your CHIS authorisations for HN 118. We don't need to turn it up.
Yeah, I accept that, yeah.
But the reference, sir, just for your note, is MPS 0526-933 at page 215. So it's certainly something of a standard practice, so far as you were concerned, across different UCOs and different authorisations. It would appear to be the
case, yes.
So to what extent or what impact did this have on the assessment of necessity and proportionality in relation to these deployments, given that this is for a RIPA authorisation?
All the officers knew what collateral intrusion was. They've all either had training, either on the SDS or before they come to the SDS. They're all detectives. We all knew about RIPA. So there was an awareness of what collateral intrusion is. So normal sort of conversations between the cover officer and the UCO, these things would be discussed. He'd be talking about a group, and there may be stuff there he's talking about that's collateral intrusion. My concern was then whether it goes into reporting, and is it necessary? Because often it would be necessary for legend building or legend maintenance, that type of thing.
DCI Flood and McKinney did a review on the 21st of March 2006. I don't think we need to turn it up, but it's MPS 0748940. At page 4, paragraph E, there's a recommendation that the section outlining collateral intrusion must be given more consideration and be completed on an individual basis, not given a set few lines of similar content. Would you agree with that now?
I would, yes.
And why wasn't that being done already at the time? That can be taken down, thank you.
I don't know. It does look quite lazy, I suppose, yes.
Was this subject the subject of any training or guidance on RIPA that you received?
Not on the SDS. I think, bear in mind it was 2000, wasn't it, RIPA? when something like this major legislation came in, the Special Branch Training Unit would normally hold sessions to instruct, what is this new legislation and what the implications are, etc. I can't remember, but I would have got my knowledge from that type of, session.
Which would have included something about collateral intrusion
Yeah,
and the need
absolutely.
to avoid it.
Yes.
In your witness statement at paragraph 186, page 77, you say, in my view, there was a difference between reporting on and mentioning. And I just want to ask you what you think the difference is between those two things in terms of reporting on or mentioning an individual in an intelligence report.
I think I'm probably meaning mentioning as somebody who's come within that sphere, but who's of not particular interest. So like an associate, somebody within a network. I can only imagine that's what I meant.
So someone who wasn't specifically targeted,
Yes,
but was included in an intelligence report.
yes.
And what was the basis for that distinction being applied in practice? How did that actually apply in practice?
Again, I would expect when the officer's gone to a meeting, an event, something of that nature, when we do a debrief, he would have given me as much information as possible, and that may have included names of individuals who weren't targets, but may be within that network that we're interested in. So the officer, would feel obliged to give as much information as possible. It's then for me to either filter that information to look at, is this name something we should be checking, that type of activity.
Yeah, as you say in your witness statement, we would also sanitise any reporting where content was considered not to be appropriate, proportionate, or for a lawful purpose. What sort of information would you sanitise out of reports then?
As we said, if I'd considered it was totally irrelevant, then filter it out.
Were you given any guidance about whether something was to be considered appropriate, proportionate, or for a lawful purpose? Or did you use your own judgment?
My own judgment based on whatever training I'd had.
We know that personal, sometimes very personal information was sometimes recorded. Why would that type of information have been recorded?
I can only come back to what I said previously, and I know it looks very outdated, but as intelligence officers, if you like, we were trained to gather as much information as possible. That partial telephone number might be relevant to another part of the inquiry we don't know. So I think it became ingrained into us to collect extensive data information. And as has been shown with the inquiry, it obviously went beyond what we should have been collecting. Yes, I accept that.
Thank you. So those are all the questions that I have for Mr. Beels. I note the time. We need to take a break in any event to consider Rule 10s.
Of course. How long do you anticipate will be needed for that purpose?
Could we say 15 minutes?
Certainly.
And I'll see if I
Yes.
need any more.
Very well. Break for 15 minutes.
Sir, thank you. There's just one short topic that I wish to ask Mr.
Yes.
Beels about, and then I'm finished, and I understand there's no re-examination. Mr. Beels, in relation to HN18's reporting, and in particular in relation to the woman that we're referring to as Maya, whom he had a sexual relationship with when he was undercover, I just want to look at one document, please. It's MPS 0065807 at page 2, please. Or perhaps we should see the first page first, and then page 2 is the one I need. This is in HN18's bundle, sir. And then at page 2. And you see there towards the top of the page, there's reporting on Maya being a close associate of the activist Atif Chowdhury. This document is a composite document of several different individual intelligence reports, and they're individual reports of those around this one occur in a numerical sequence. But the one that deals with this particular report, as in the original individual report on Maya being a close associate of Atif Chowdhury, is missing from that sequence, and we haven't been able to locate it. HN18 was asked about it in evidence, and he said that he didn't know what happened to that report. And he said that you, DS Gilbertson, and HN30 would have been the DSs writing up his reports at this time. And I just want to ask you whether you know what happened to that missing report.
I don't know.
Was there any sense in the office that if there was an awareness of a sexual relationship undercover, that person shouldn't be reported on in order to conceal the relationship?
Sorry, can you ask that again?
Was there an understanding in the SDS at the time that reports shouldn't be made on those people who were in sexual relationships with a UCO in order to conceal that sexual relationship?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Thank you, sir. Those are all my questions.
Yes. Thank you.
No questions from Mr. Sanders, I understand.
In which case your evidence is now complete. Thank you for coming and speaking of all these matters all those years ago in a public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now adjourn while the room is reset up for a private hearing with Helen Steele.